My name is Stew Turcotte, and I live here in Kelowna, and I've lived here since 1966. And I have been, for the last 20 years, associated with the Hamilton Art Galleries, which is the first gallery outside of Vancouver. So it's the oldest commercial art gallery in British Columbia. It's going into its 56th year now. And I had it for the last 19 years. And so it's given me a lot of experience to meet the collectors in the area, and the different types of artwork that have gone through are very exciting, and it's just become a better and better place as far as I can see in the last 20 years. The reason that I was chosen as guest curator for this show is that I knew the collector very well in my years as the curator of the Hamilton Galleries. I met Dr. Luigi Rossi in my very first year, and he would come in every time that he was in Kelowna. He had a clinic up in Grand Prairie, so he wasn't here all the time, but he was in for a week of every month, and he'd always stop in at the gallery and touch bases with me and see what was new, and we would have stories for each other, go for lunch sometimes, and it was just a really great relationship that started way back about 20 years ago. The works in this show came from Dr. Luigi's collection, most of which were in his condo right here in town, and the rest we got after he passed away. His brother contacted me, Dave, and asked if I could bring pieces down from Luigi's home in Grand Prairie, because they were selling that home, and he'd never been there. He didn't know what he had up there. And the guy that normally carries artworks for us was on holidays, so my brother and I rented a U-Haul and drove up there and loaded it all up, documented everything up there, photographed, measured, took the names off everything, put it all together in a spreadsheet, and then brought them all back down. And so we discovered there were a further 85 paintings up there. And they went up to 5 feet by 7 feet, so not a small load by any means at all. So we brought those down here and put most of those into storage. And at that time, because Luigi had always wanted to share his collection with other collectors and the public and at large, he always made them aware to people, either personally or through me. If he was not here, he would give me access to his home, or the National Gallery or the Glenbow, or whoever was having a show for one of the artists that he collected, he would make those works available to them. And when he passed away, the director of the art gallery here knew what a fine collection it was. So Natalie asked if we could do a show with his works. And Dave and I spoke, and he agreed that that's what he wanted to do. He wanted to carry on Luigi's passion and direction, so he wanted to make the works available. Dr. Luigi Rossi was a doctor, first of all, studied at UBC, became a GP for a very short period of time, and then he realized that he really didn't have the temperament or patience to sort of work one-to-one with patients all the time. And so he went and did some further studying and got into radiology and changed his focus, and bought into a clinic up in Grand Prairie, and spent 25 years or so up there doing radiology, always upgrading, and that was a way that he sort of was able to meet with his passion on one-on-one all the time, is because whenever he went off to Dallas or Miami or places like that to do upgrading on his work, he always made sure that he went through Montreal, Toronto, and Ottawa, so that he would be able to go to the National Gallery, the AGO, the Museum of Modern Art in Montreal, and any other commercial galleries that housed artists that he collected. Yeah, I have lots of memories of working with Luigi, but one that comes to mind was when I was first hanging his collection. Like, we got into a brand new white space, and he basically told me which pieces he wanted around, and then I got to fill in the rest of the spaces. And he would situate a chair and talk to me while I was hanging. So while I was hanging around the living room, I think there's about 27 pieces in the living room. He would sit on a chair there while I went up and down my ladder and measured and hung things. And every once in a while, if something was too big, he'd give me a hand. And then when I started down the hallway, he'd move her into the kitchen so that he could sit in a chair there and watch me going up and down the hallway. And then as I got in each of the bedrooms in the office, he'd move into that room because it was cut off from the hallway. And he would make sure that he was always in conversation and eye contact with me whenever I was working. Not because he was watching, but he was just interested in what I was doing, and he wanted to know what I thought about the pieces. And we always just carried on a conversation while I was working. And then after about 3 days of hanging to do the initial hang on his collection, when I was leaving, he told me one thing that I felt very emotional now about, but he told me that the paintings were his friends. And that indeed was the way that he had a relationship with his paintings. When he came down here, the first thing he did was go to his condo and just refresh himself and make a reacquaintance with his paintings. And at the time of his passing, we had a few of them up here in the gallery. And we knew that he was not going to live much longer, so we hurried to get the paintings back to him so that he could have his house full when he was leaving the world. There was too many paintings. We had a choice of about 255 pieces, and because that was with the addition of the 85 from Grand Prairie. So we had about 127 pieces on the wall here, plus sculptures. And when I went around, what I did to set this show up is I created a scale model of the gallery in half-inch scale, because I'm a very visual, very hands-on person, and I've always worked in half-inch scale. So I made the gallery, the big room, and then I took pictures of all of the paintings and put those into half-inch scale, and then I physically hung them with Scotch tape around the room so that I could see how they would work out. And I realized when I had filled the room to what I thought was acceptable but still pretty close, there was only 70 pieces in the show, and he had 170 on his walls practically. So that just shows you the difference between salon hanging and this big open hanging that we use in the gallery here. We try and give pieces their white space and possibly have notes in between and a few things like that. Whereas in his own home, he had things in some places hung 3 high. And there was never white space more than about 3 or 4 inches between. So it was art wallpaper. And it's not for everybody, but it was just awesomely beautiful because he chose them all very carefully, and they were all very good paintings. And so it was amazing to walk through and see them. Well, I think what'll make this show a success will be what people take away from it. I think people will, when they walk in, will be impressed with the bright colors and the size of the paintings that this man was able to collect and put into his collection, and what a really good collection it is. I think Kelowna is a relatively small town, and I don't think people expect that there's going to be collections like this in this town. And Another thing that I hope that people take away from seeing this show is that this shows why we really need collectors. There have been in Canada's history some really good collectors. All of these single people put together massive collections that are available for the general public to see, to ensure that everything isn't locked away in private collections forever, that it's all available. Not everybody will give to the National Gallery or the AGO, so we need some of these other big private collections around to be housed properly and made accessible.